Welcome to Go from Zero to Atlas with MongoDB CLI. So what do we not have enough of? Time. It feels like every day we have more and more on our plates. Balancing the demands of life, career, and hobbies, and more can be really challenging. I've tried at least a few productivity hacks I've read about on LinkedIn this year, just to try to eke out a bit more time each day. While we at MongoDB can't make all the things in your life more efficient or faster, we can make it so for your MongoDB needs. And we can do that with MongoDB Atlas. My name's Melissa Plunkett, and I'm a lead product manager here at MongoDB. I've worked with our team of amazing engineers to help bring the MongoDB CLI to you and ensure it fits your needs and workflow. I'm super excited to share tips and tricks on how to get started.
Hello everyone, my name is Andrea Angiolillo and I'm a software developer of the API Experience team here at MongoDB. In the last year, I've been contributing to the MongoDB CLI project, and today I'm going to help you going from zero to Atlas with MongoDB CLI.
If you're like me and you want to know all about your destination before you set off on a trip, so let's get started with talking about where we are going and why it's a pretty awesome destination. So what makes Atlas so fast? It takes care of so much of the busy, low-value work for you, allowing you to focus on the race at hand. It removes all the complex operational stuff, so you have what you need, an immediate working MongoDB instance that's highly available and scalable with a ton of tools to help you with anything from search to charting. Atlas also guides you along the way with built-in advisors like auto-scaling and schema and index suggestions. Everything is secure by default, so you don't have to spend time setting up complicated encryption or figuring out how to turn on authentication. I know I've certainly locked myself out of a few installs when trying to set up authentication myself. It's available in a plethora of cloud regions around the world and across all three major cloud providers, including creating a MongoDB deployment that spans all three providers. And it includes comprehensive backup and full monitoring, so you both know what's going on and can go back in time in case somebody has an accident on the track. All you need to do is go to the UI, select your options, and you're off coding the next big thing. But using the UI is great to get started in your day-to-day work. The first few times you use the UI, you're like, wow, this is great, look at all I can do. But by the 25th time, it might start to become a bit of a slog. Stop what you're doing, go to the browser, click all the buttons yet again. Normally, we just want to replace this with a small script and be able to rock that out when we need it, right? So how do we solve this dilemma for you? We built the MongoDB CLI, a command line interface to allow you to easily perform those needed administrative tasks quickly and easily, right within your normal workflow. You can run the commands you need right in the command line to create and manage your MongoDB deployments and script it out for running again and again later. The MongoDB CLI works with Atlas, which we are focusing on today, as well as all of our cloud products, including our on-prem product, Ops Manager. We designed it for maximum flexibility. It includes the ability to have multiple profiles and simple to complex commands. Today we'll show you both how to get started as fast as possible with the MongoDB Quickstart command that's showing in this GIF, and then we'll break down some of what that Quickstart is doing, so that you know how to create more complex deployments as you go along in your journey. Then we'll end with a few popular commands to help you get a leg up on the other racers out there. But first, we need to make sure you're ready to hit the track. There are a few prereqs you'll need to ensure you have ready in order to race with us today. These were noted in the tutorial description, but we're going to go ahead and go through them now to make sure everything is ready to go. You'll need to have signed up for an Atlas account, have added a payment method to the account, as we are creating a few clusters that do have some costs associated with them today. You'll need to have installed the MongoCLI via your preferred method, which you can find in the documentation. And be ready to have some fun, learning to move faster than ever. So let's double check you know where and how to log in and find the billing information, which will ensure all the prereqs are done for you. So first of all, you need to ensure you're at account.mongodb.com. So follow along with these yellow arrows, and that will show you where you need to be. You will then log in with the Atlas account you already created, If you haven't, click the sign up link on the website and go ahead and get that going. Once you've logged in, look at the upper left-hand side and find the billing link. Go ahead and click that. Now that you're in the billing section, you're going to want to look over to the right and check that you have a payment method already. I already have a credit card here, so you can see that right there, and I can edit my payment. But I'm guessing most of you probably won't have a payment method yet, so you're going to see this screen. You can click Add Credit Card, PayPal, and enter your preferred method. So we have most of the pre-race needs complete, but we still need some keys to start the car. The Atlas Administrative API, which is what the CLI uses under the hood, performs authentication via programmatic API key pairs. These key pairs provide both authentication and authorization via role-based access control. You give the key pairs a role or roles either at the organization level, which is the uppermost part of the hierarchy, like an org owner or member, or project level, which is a way to organize resources within the organization. And you can give something like project owner. There are multiple roles to choose from, but always try to give the role with the least amount of privileges that you know that user will use. That just makes sure that we keep our access restricted by that person's role. To further ensure security, we're going to restrict the API access list to just the known location that the API key is being used from. So this is just another layer in our safety system to make sure that we're restricting who can do what. In addition to the keys, we have a few more pre-race tasks to get taken care of before we can hit the track. We need to create that organization that I just mentioned in your Atlas account and a project within it. Then we'll create the API key pair to use today with the organization owner role. So we'll have the ability to do any action, and then because of that, we're going to be sure to restrict the key to a single IP address, basically where we're running the MongoDB CLI from. So we're going to go back to our UI, and we're going to look in the upper right-hand corner and click on our name. So click on your name there, and select the organization from the drop-down menu. When you do that, you're going to go ahead and click that button, Create New Organization. So right there. And then here, all we need to do is enter a name. So I put Live Demo, and ensure MongoDB Atlas is selected at the bottom, and then just click Next. So we don't need any other organization members right now. If you were doing this for production, you're probably going to add your team members, but it's already added you, so you just need to click Create Organization. That will create your org. Once we do that, we're ready to create a project within that org. Like I said before, that's just a part of the hierarchy. So you'll have a single organization with one or more projects, and then you can put your MongoDB deployments in those projects. And you can restrict users, IP addresses, and various other mechanisms to make sure that certain users only have access to what they need. So let's go ahead and click New Project. And then again, we're going to have to give it a name. I use Live Demo Project to try to remember what I was using this for, and then click Next. So just like last time, we don't need to add any other members other than ourselves, which is already added for us here. So we can go ahead and click Create Project. So now we're ready to get our keys for our car. So we're going to click that little cog icon in the upper left-hand corner. And once we do that, we're going to click the Access Manager in the left-hand menu. This is going to take us to the screen where we can create our API key pair. So you're going to click that tab there at the top. This is API Keys. And then go ahead and click Create API Key. Once we're here, we need to enter a name for the API key. I put Live API Key here. But when I do it for a real project, I usually put my name and what the key is for, which makes it easy for my colleagues to see exactly what's going on in the same project and organization. Then you're going to click the Organization Permissions. This is for that role-based access control I mentioned. And again, as I said, we're going to pick the highest level of roles, so basically sort of the root user, and we're going to select the organization owner. Go ahead and deselect organization member, as that will already be selected as the default for you. Once you're done with that, click Next. It may be hidden. I didn't have it in that screen there. So that's where we get our keys to our car on this next screen. We have the public key, which we can see after creation, but still good to copy it here with the handy copy button right there. We also have the private key, which is noted here is only shown once. If you forget to save it here and store it securely now, you're going to have to create another key, as this info cannot be looked up after this window goes away. Also, if you scroll down a bit, you'll see where we can go to add that API access list. So do that. And when you get to the end, click Add Access List Entry. And that's going to bring up a modal. And what we can do to really make this quick is just click Use Current IP Address. That's going to auto fill out the entry form for you. So there's an IP that already got entered because I already clicked that button. And then we're just going to click Save to save that IP address. That's it. We're all done. We can just go ahead and click Done. So now we can see that key in the UI, including the public key, as I mentioned, so we can still see what that is. But that private key is gone. So if you didn't click that copy button, you're going to need to go through that process again. So with that, we're all ready for our race. So now that we have those keys, let's start the car. So the MongoDB CLI has profiles, which allow you to save the needed credentials and information for one or more profiles. So if you have, for example, a programmatic key pair for different projects, you can save them in different profiles and use them all with the MongoDB CLI. The very first profile created is called the default, and it is the one loaded if no other profile is designated on the command line. At a minimum, all you need is that programmatic key pair we just created. It can actually see what organization and projects it has access to, and it will allow you to choose that in an interactive fashion to associate with that profile. You can also set your MongoDB shell location in the profile, so you can launch a MongoDB shell right from the CLI. Andrea, would you mind showing everyone how to start their MongoDB CLI?
Sure, setting up MongoDB CLI is extremely easy. We just need to type CLI followed by config. Here we need to provide the public API key that we just created with the help of Melissa. In order to do so, we just need to access our Atlas account in this page and then copy your public key. Then we need to do the same with the private API key. Perfect. Once we have provided this key, MongoDB CLI is going to show us the organization associated with those keys. So in this case, we can just press Enter. Now, MongoDB CLI is showing us all the projects under the organization that we just provided. In my case, I only have one project, so I'm going to select this one. And finally, MongoDB CLI is asking us to provide the path to the MongoDB shell binary installed in your system. Now, this step is completely optional, so you can press Enter if you want to provide the MongoDB shell path, or if you don't have installed MongoDB shell in your system. Now, in my case, I have already installed MongoDB shell, so MongoDB CLI is suggesting me that he found actually the MongoDB shell binary in this particular location, so I can just press Enter to use this MongoDB shell binary. Perfect, so we've just created our MongoDB CLI profile. Back to Melissa.
Thank you, Andrea. Okay, we have everything configured. Let's do this thing. So the MongoCLI Quickstart ensures we have everything we really need to jump right off the starting line. Every option has a default, so you can just keep hitting Enter and get all you need in the end. However, options can also be modified in interactive mode for quick customizations. You can also launch the Quickstart with flags for non-interactive use. So if you want something other than the auto-generated cluster name, but all the other defaults are okay for your use case, you can just do -- cluster name and the cluster name you prefer. Finally, the Quickstart provides everything you need to get started. An M2 cluster, which is a perfect size for development and experimentation, a MongoDB database user and password, a project IP access list to ensure that it's locked down to the IP that you specify, and the ability to launch a shell connection to the finished cluster in the MongoDB shell. And so with that, Andrea, I'm from the great state of Missouri, and we're called the Show Me State. So let's do that and show everyone how to do the MongoDB Atlas Quickstart.
Sure, let's see now how we can use the Quickstart command. We just need to type MongoCLI, followed by Atlas, and then Quickstart. First question is about the cluster name. Here we can provide a custom cluster name or press enter if you want to use the auto-generated name. If you need help, you can always type the question mark. Let's use the auto-generated name for our cluster. Then we also need to select the cloud provider. I'm going to select AWS here. Then we also need to provide the provider region. The first region of this list is the most used region for the chosen cloud provider, but you can definitely decide to use another region if you want. I'm going to select the US East one for our cluster. Then we can also load simple data into our cluster. Now I'm going to select yes for this step, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about this step later. Perfect. As you can see here, MongoCLI is already deploying our cluster. So if we check out the Atlas UI, we're going to see that actually, indeed, Atlas is creating our cluster. So let's go back to the MongoCLI. The next step is about the database username. Now, again, we can press enter if we want to use the auto-generated name, or we can provide a username. If we need help, again, we can press the question mark. Let's call this user them. Then the next question is about the database user password. Here we can again press enter if we want to use the auto-generated password or provide a new password. I'm going to press enter for this step. Perfect. So we have just created our database user. So the next step is about the Atlas access list. Here, Quickstart does something really cool. So if you press enter in this step, MongoCLI is going to use your public IP address as entry for the Atlas access list so that you can access your cluster with your machine. So I'm going to press enter for this step. And the last step is about the MongoDB shell. So if we press yes here, we can access our cluster with MongoDB shell. So I'm going to type yes. Perfect. So now we are just waiting for the creation of our cluster. You can see here that it's safe to stop this process. Even if you stop this process, you are going to get your cluster, so don't worry about it. Okay, now MongoCLI is loading simple data into our cluster. Okay, our cluster is ready, and we accessed our cluster with MongoDB shell. Please note that MongoCLI print this string, this particular string, so that you can also access your cluster in a later time. So let's use our cluster. So let's see which particular database are inside this cluster. Okay, as you can see here, we have all these simple database. So let's use the simple restaurant. Perfect. So let's see the collection inside this database. Okay, let's use the restaurant collection, then we can try to find one and see if actually there is something inside. Perfect. As you can see, there is also data inside this collection. So perfect. Back to Melissa.
So you might be asking yourself, is the MongoCLI just a starter tool? Absolutely not. The CLI will support you in your normal day-to-day interactions and needs. It's not just for getting started, but of course we wanted to make that really easy. It's also for when you get more experience with Atlas and need more complex deployments. So let's dive deeper into the individual commands that the Quickstart put together for us. One thing to note, the commands in the black or darker font in the following slides are clip command examples, and they just show the start of the command. Those in the green or the lighter font are fully functional examples, so feel free to try those out now or later. So the Quickstart selected a default M2 cluster for you. A shared tier cluster that gives you about 1/2 gig of space. So that's likely fine for some basic testing and some experiments. But when you go to production, you're likely going to want something more powerful with some other features, maybe some more advanced backup and very specific version of MongoDB and maybe some specific nodes for analytics. The cluster command shown here allows you to do this kind of fine-grained configuration. This command, this example in green, creates a 5-member replica set with an M30, so pretty powerful production-grade cluster with 8 gigs of RAM and 40 gigs of storage. That's in AWS and the Eastern region, with backup enabled and the truly latest version of MongoDB, all output on the results in JSON format. But obviously, that's not all there is. You can also list your clusters out, describe them to find more about them. You can update them, so go from an M30 up to maybe an M40 as you grow. And of course, everyone's favorite, myself included, which is pause and then restarting a cluster. So you can save a little money when you aren't using them, but you won't lose any of the data that you already put into the cluster. So with that, Andrea, could you maybe show us an even more advanced cluster and maybe show us how to use the CLI helper while you're at it as well, and then finally delete it so that we don't have that around later and we're only going to use it for this example.
Sure, let's first see how to use the CLI helper. Now, within MongoCLI, you can always use the help flag. This flag helps you and give you some information about how to use your command. Now, in general, you have the usage section that shows you how to use this command. In our case, MongoCLI takes another command after it. Then the example section. So this section shows you how to use this command. And then in this case, we have the available commands that we can use after MongoDB CLI. Now we have the config command, which we use to create a new MongoDB CLI profile, and also other available commands. Now, today we are focusing more on Atlas, so this is why I'm going to use the Atlas command now. Now we can use again the help flag here so that we know the available commands under Atlas. And as you can see here, we have the Quickstart command, which we already used, and then also other available commands. So I suggest you to check out our documentation to see how to use all of these commands. Now I'm going to show you how to use the cluster command. So let's see here, cluster, and in particular the create command. So let's use the help flag here. Perfect. From the usage, we note that the cluster create commands takes in input a name and also some flags. Then we also have some examples here on how to use this command that I'm going to skip for now. And then the list of available flags. Now, the cluster create commands can be used in two different ways. The first one is to provide all the cluster information using all the available flags here. Or the second way is to provide only one particular flag, which is file, and then provide all the cluster information using a configuration file. Now I'm going to show you both ways. But first, you may wonder, why using the cluster create command when you can use the Quickstart command, right? And the reason is that the Quickstart command creates for you a M2 cluster, which is great for testing and learning more about MongoDB, but is not great for production application. Now with the cluster create, I'm going to show you how to create a M40 cluster, which gives you at least 16 GB of RAM and 80 GB of storage. So definitely a more powerful machine that you can use with your production application. So let's see how to do that. First thing to do is to provide the cluster name, right? So I'm going to call my class a cluster test1. And then I want to enable backup. So I'm going to use the backup flag. Perfect. After that, we also need to provide the provider flag, and I'm going to use AWS for this cluster. Then the region, US East 1. Then, as I said, I'm going to deploy a M40 cluster, so the tier is going to be M40. Perfect. Now, the type of the cluster is going to be a replica set. Then the member of the replica set is going to be 5 members. Now, we can definitely use the command as it is right now, but we can also provide the output flag if we want. Now, if we don't provide this flag, MongoCLI show you the output as with a human readable format, but if you can also decide to use the JSON format. So I'm going to select the JSON for now, so that you can also see how this looks like. So let's do this. Okay, perfect. So we get all the cluster informations in a JSON format, as you can see here. So let's check out this information. So the cluster type is a replica set, as we provide through our flag. Then we also have other information like the ID of the cluster, the group ID associated to our cluster, the MongoDB version 4.4.6, which is the default right now, MongoDB major version 4.4, number shard, which is 1 for our replica set. Also the provider settings information like the provider name, the region, the volume type, and so on. And then another particular important information is the state name. As you can see here, this says creating, which means that Atlas is deploying your cluster. So if we check out the Atlas UI here, we are going to see that Atlas indeed is creating our cluster. Now, the process of creating a fully redundant and secure MongoDB cluster takes between 7 to 10 minutes, so please keep in mind that. Now, in the meantime that we are waiting for our cluster, let's see how to use the cluster create command with a configuration file. So let me first show you the configuration file that I'm going to use. Okay, so I'm just providing all the exact information that we already provide through flags using this configuration file. Now, I suggest you to check out our documentation to see the meaning of each of these field. But for now, you just need to know that, I'm going to call my cluster cluster1. Number of the shard is going to be 1 because we're going to create a replica set. The same provider settings information, AWS, the instance size M40, the region, the cluster type, which is a replica set. What else? I'm going to enable backup here. So these are generally the same information that I provide through flags before. So let's see how to use this configuration file. So MongoCLI, Atlas, cluster, create, and then we just need to use the file flags and provide the configuration name. Okay, perfect. As you can see here, we didn't provide the output flag, right? So MongoCLI is showing us a human readable format for this command, which is just saying deploying my cluster 1. So if we check out the Atlas UI, we are going to see that Atlas is also deploying my other cluster, which is my cluster 1. Now, instead of check out the Atlas UI, we can also use another MongoCLI command, which is MongoCLI Atlas clusters list, which show us all the available clusters in our project. So as you can see here, the state of these two clusters is still creating. So we just need to wait that Atlas complete this particular process. So let's wait. Okay, so my two clusters are available right now. So let's see how to delete one cluster with MongoDB CLI. So we need to use the MongoCLI Atlas cluster delete command. Now this command can input the name of the cluster. So in my case is my cluster 1. And then we can also use the force flag. So this particular flag just says that we are sure that we want to delete our cluster and we don't want to see a confirmation message that asks us if we want to delete our cluster. So, but first, let me show you this command without the first flag. As you can see here, we get this confirmation message. So yes. Okay, so cluster 1 deleted. So if we check out the Atlas UI, you see here that Atlas is deleting our cluster. So let's see how to delete the second one with the force flag. Now, we can do the same by providing the other name and then use the first force flag. Perfect. So we also deleted the second command. So let's check out the Atlas UI. This might take some seconds to show up in the Atlas UI because Atlas is already doing the Atlas command. Here we are. So as you can see here, also the process of deleting the second cluster has started. So back to Melissa.
You will need to give your users access to the database. The Quickstart created a default user and password for you with the role of Atlas admin, which means that you can do pretty much anything with that user. That's the equivalent of a root user. However, you may want to give users access to only be able to read or maybe only read and write. and do that only to a specific database. This is when the DB user command is going to be really helpful for you. As you can see here on the screen, you can specify a role or roles for the user. So we've used read write any database here and cluster monitor. And even what specific databases and collections they can access, or you could even expand that out and do a specific lockdown with the scopes flag to specific clusters or specific data lakes. And just like clusters, you can list out your users, you can modify your users with the CLI, you can describe them to learn more, and of course you can delete them. Furthermore, you can even do things like manage your X509 users and create them. The sky's really the limit with the DB user command. And so with that, Andrea, could you maybe give me read and write access to a database within our new cluster?
Sure. Let's see now how we can create a new database user for Melissa with MongoDB CLI. The first thing to do is to type MongoCLI, followed by Atlas, DB users, and then create. Let's use the help flag to discover how to use this command. Okay, as you can see here, we have the usage where it's showing us how to use this particular command. So this create command is going to take an input subflags. Then we have also some examples here. And finally, we have a list of flags available. Now, we are going to create a new database user for Melissa, so we need to provide the username using the flag username, and also the password of this DB user. So we are also going to use the password flag. Then we are going also to use the role flag so that we can associate to our DB user only the role read and write. And finally, we are going also to use the scope flag so that we are going to limit the access of our database user to only one particular deployment. So let's do that. So we type MongoCLI, Atlas, users, create, and as I said, first of all, the username. All the user Melissa, then the password, and we need to provide the role. So the role flag. Perfect. And finally, we also need to provide the scope flag to limit the access of our database user. So the scope taking input a particular string composed by two parts. The first one is the deployment name, so in my case it's cluster1, and then the deployment type, in our case cluster, but this can also be Atlas Data Lake. Okay, so let's do it. And as you can see here, we have just created a new user for Melissa, so let's check out in the Atlas account. Okay, perfect. Let me zoom in here, and as you can see here, we have two different users, Melissa, which we just created, with only that can only access one particular cluster. And then we also have the Quickstart user, which was created with the Quickstart command. Back to Melissa.
As we noted earlier, Atlas is secure by default. Clusters are encrypted at rest by default. All connections are over TLS by default. Authentication is on by default. And importantly, for what we're talking about right now, by default, all network access is blocked to your brand new cluster. This is why the Quickstart added an IP address to the project access list for you, offering to add the IP address of the machine that you're running the CLI command from. But if you go to work in a coffee shop or maybe go back to the office, then you may want to add another IP address or a CIDR range, and the access list command allows you to do exactly that. Another important feature is that beyond IP addresses, and I've already mentioned that, you can also add CIDR blocks, so a whole range, and even AWS security groups. Now, do notice that this is an access list for a whole project. So when you add a new entry, it opens it up for all of the clusters that are in that project. This is where you can add a mix of projects to ensure that you're narrowing access to specific clusters from the right network ranges. And of course, just like we could for the other commands, we can do some more additional commands to list out our IP access and other access list entries. We can use describe to see things like the comments we might have included with them, and of course we can delete them. So with that, Andrea, do you think you can add a CIDR range to the new cluster so that when we can go out to more locations and when we're back on the road again, we can reach our cluster from more places?
Sure. Let's see now how we can add a new entry to the Atlas access list so that you can also access your deployments from different locations. The first thing to type is MongoDB CLI, followed by Atlas, access list, and then create. Here we can use the help flag to discover how to use this command. Perfect. From the usage section, we know that access list create takes in input an entry and also some flags. In my particular scenario, I want to provide a new CIDR range so that I can also access my cluster from the MongoDB office. So I'm going to provide the CIDR range as entry, and then I'm going to provide also the type flags. And for this flag, I'm going to provide the value CIDR block. But as you can see here, the type flag takes in input also other values, which can be IP address, AWS security group. Now, let's add this CIDR range to the Atlas access list. So just need to provide the CIDR range, so let me do that. And then the type flag. Perfect, we just created a new entry for the Atlas access list. So let's check out in the Atlas UI. Okay, as you can see here, let me zoom in. We have two different entries. The first one has been created by the Quickstart command, and the second one has just been created by the MongoDB CLI. But now that I notice the range, I see that actually it's wrong. So let's see how to delete this particular entry with MongoDB CLI. So we just need to use the MongoCLI Atlas access list delete command. And this command can input the entity we want to delete. So in this case, my CIDR range. Then we need to confirm that we want to delete the entry. And perfect, so we have just deleted the entry. So let's check out in the Atlas UI. Okay, as you can see here, we just have one entry. So let's add again the entry, but this time using the correct CIDR range. Access list, create the new CIDR range, then the type. Perfect, we have just created this new entry. So let's check out the Atlas UI again. Okay, we can see this particular entry here. So there is also another way to check out if actually your entry is being created. So we can use another MongoCLI commands, which is the MongoCLI Atlas access list. And we use the list command in this case. And as you can see here, we have two different entries. Back to Melissa.
Clusters, database users, access lists are just a few of the many options the CLI has for managing your Atlas deployments. Two common ones that I see needed next are usually around networking configurations. So you can indeed configure private net and peering with the CLI. Also, events is another favorite command, allowing you to see all the events that are shown in the UI and the activity feed through the CLI. Be sure to check these out as you advance on your MongoDB CLI journey. So we've given you a lot of skills to go even faster and finish the race. But we want to leave you with just a few more common tasks that we know users love to use the CLI for. The first of these is going to be around logs. By far, one of the most popular tasks we've seen the CLI use for is to download MongoDB logs. It's pretty cool, and it makes it super easy to grab a log, see exactly what's going on. If you'll notice at the bold part here, and the second command is a host name. You'll need that to be able to specify which machine's log you'd like to download. You can get that with the process command that will list out all the host names in the project. The third command shows an example of doing this. Finally, one command to mention here, the last one in the slide, is that you can also download the slow query logs, which can help you narrow in on problem areas to address. But remember, Atlas also has a lot of different advisory services built into it that will suggest improvements for your schema or your indexes, basically help guide you through that as well. But this is just another source of information. So with that, let's download a log file and see what we find. Andrea?
Thanks, Melissa. Let's see now how we can download logs with MongoDB CLI. But first, we need to decide which machine logs we want to download. In order to do that, we can use the command MongoCLI, Atlas, process, and then list. This command shows us all the available host names inside our project. So let's select one of these host names so that we can download our logs. Next command to use is MongoCLI, Atlas, logs, and then download. Let's use the help flag here to discover how to use this command. So from the usage section, we know that this command takes in input the host name and also the type of log that we want to download. In addition, we have also some available flags. We have start and end, which allow us to provide a period for which to retrieve our logs. Then the force flag, which allow us to override the destination file. And finally, we have the out flag, which allow us to provide an optional output file name. So let's use this command. We need to provide the host name, and then we also need to provide the type of log. Okay. You can see here I got an error which is related to the fact that I already downloaded this log, so I also need to provide the force flag to override my log file. Perfect, let's check out this file. And perfect, as you can see here, we got our log entries. So let's close this file for now. Let's see now how we can list these log queries for our deployment. We just need to type MongoCLI, followed by Atlas, performance, and then slow query logs. Here we also need to type list. Now, this command uses the flag process name, so we need to provide the process name in order to download the slow queries related to it. So let's do that. And press enter. Okay, as you can see here, I got two different slow queries for my deployment. Back to Melissa.
Earlier, we created a project in the UI, which allowed us to go ahead and get going. But now let's do the same with the CLI. This uses the IAM command with MongoDB CLI. IAM is for Identity and Access Management. It's the same command we use across all of our cloud products. All you need is the organization or org ID, which can be easily found for your default profile using the third command in the list here. So with that, let's go ahead and create a new project, but this time we're going to do it with the CLI. Andrea, take it away.
Thanks, Melissa. Let's see now how easy it is to create a new project with MongoDB CLI. But first, let's talk a little bit more about MongoCLI IAM. IAM stands for Identity and Access Management, and you can find all the MongoCLI commands that allow you to manage project, organization, users, teams, and also API keys under this command. In our case, we are going to create a new project, so we are going to use MongoCLI IAM projects and then create. Let's do that. Then we just need to provide the project name. So I'm going to call my project test1. And that's it. We have just created a new project. Let's now check out if actually this project was created with MongoDB CLI. Perfect. As you can see here, we have two different projects, and one is project 0 and the second one is project test 1, which we have just created. Back to Melissa.
We learned a lot today. We now have a fully installed, configured, and ready to go MongoCLI and Atlas account. With that, you can run the Quickstart to create everything you need to get started on a new project with Atlas. You have what you need to create specific deployments, users, and other items for production application as you move along your development cycle. You also have a few useful tips and tricks to help you on your journey. I'd say it's been a pretty productive time, and we hope that it flew by for you. But we couldn't leave without giving you a few parting gifts after the race. So first, a way to give us feedback on the tool. We have at MongoDB a feedback portal where you can submit your feature ideas and upvote ones that are already there. The URL here will go directly to feedback for the MongoCLI. Finally, if you'd love to give us even more direct feedback, we have a form at the short link on the screen. It takes feedback and goes directly to our design and research teams as well as product. This gives you a chance to give very direct input, including noting if you'd like to participate in studies where we gather feedback on both existing and brand new features before sometimes they even come out. Second, I'd like to leave you with a few resources that you'll have accessible on your journey. First, there is help and documentation in the CLI itself, which you saw today in Andrea's demonstrations. But you can always go to the more expansive documentation online following this URL. Also, the MongoCLI is open source. You can go read the code yourself, so go check it out. And if you find a bug, feel free to go to this repository to submit an issue. We'd really appreciate it. Andrea and I would really like to thank you so very much for joining us today. Drive safely in the command line out there, and most importantly, have fun. Thank you.
Thank you.